Hello and welcome. This is Lights Out, and away we go with the episode. With the Formula One podcast for fans and by fans. I'm Will, and as I look across the digital garage, as always, I'm joined by my co-host, or should I say my co-driver, Sam. Hello, Sam. How are you?
Hello, Will. Hello, listeners. I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, not too bad. How are you?
I'm all good, thank you. Yeah, can't complain. No Formula One this weekend, so we're going to go do something a bit different. I think it should be quite a fun one. So we've had a bit of a brainstorm, and we decided to talk about the 2026 driver lineup predictions, because as we covered in one of our previous episodes, there's going to be big regulation changes in 2026, and we're going to see a few new teams in the sport. So we're going to have Audi that are going to be officially there, and we'll have new engine partners as well. So I think it's going to influence some of the driver moves. And interestingly, in next season, most of the drivers' contracts expire. So I think we are going to have a silly season potentially next year. And there are only two drivers that contracts go to 2026, the end of 26. Can you guess who they are?
I can. One's Max Verstappen, because he's on an extremely long contract.
It's 2028.
And then I think the other one's Piastri, isn't it? Because he's so new. Yeah,
his new deal has got him to 2026. So there's lots up in the air. So what we're going to do in the first half, we're going to go through half of the teams, and the second half we'll go through it. And we've each made picks of who we think the driver lineup will be. We'll have a bit of a debate about each team. So we'll start off with Mercedes. Who have you picked to be the driver lineup for? Who do you think will be the 2026 driver lineup?
Nice and easy. I think it will probably be Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. Next.
So I think the same.
Yeah.
But my theory is that if Lewis retires at the end of 2025, my hot take is that I think they'll bring Alex Albon, because I think he's demonstrating he's a very cool, calm-headed driver, and he's very quick, and I think he would be quite a good replacement for Hamilton, and probably wouldn't be too expensive because they could go and easily poach him off Williams. Whereas I don't think they'd go. I can't see them going for Charles or Norris. I think they'll be locked in. So I think that, and I think by that point Russell have matured and he'll be the main man. So I think him and Albon will be a very good duo. But that's only if Hamilton retires, which I hope doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think I might just agree with you there. I think if Lewis does retire, it's probably one of Albon, Leclerc, and Norris, isn't it? Probably.
Yeah.
Unless somebody else absolutely like blazes the way through the next couple of seasons.
Yeah.
They feel like the only real candidates. So
I did used to think Gasly would put himself in contention, but he's kind of the last couple of seasons, especially since he's moved to Alpine, he's definitely sort of plateaued, or he's not quite kicked on to where he was a couple of seasons ago when I think 2021 was a standout season for him. And he was driving better than anyone else in the midfield. Whereas I think he's kind of, I don't know, he's had a bit of a disappointing couple of years. So I think he's kind of lost his, and also he's 26. So by that point, I think they'd rather go for someone younger. Okay, so that's Mercedes, straightforward, nice, good start to the podcast.
Yep.
Red Bull, who have you gone for?
Max Verstappen.
Yeah, because he's got there with his long contract, and I think we were both theorizing earlier in the season that we thought he would hang his boots up earlier, but it looks like he's gonna stay for a while, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very. I don't know. He's quite a hard one to read, isn't he? I think of all the drivers in general, he's quite a tough one to read because there are some moments or some races where he just doesn't seem like he's really that interested. I suppose he's having a good time or whatever, but he's not really that interested in like sticking around sport. And he's always said before he's not interested in breaking records and things. But yeah, given he signed a very long contract, it's kind of hard to imagine Red Bull necessarily just letting him go, even if he decided to. So yeah, I think he'll be sticking around.
And it probably also doesn't feel like he'll do a Sebastian Vettel and sort of, because when Vettel was at his peak, you would never have thought he'd leave Red Bull, right? And then he very much wanted to go and follow off the path of his hero, Michael Schumacher, and win at Ferrari. You don't really get that impression with Max that he has that ambition to go and win at Ferrari. And also, he seems to be tied in and brought into the Red Bull project to another level than Vettel was.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's a kind of homegrown driver for them, isn't he? Really, like being through the program, although not originally. He's not a Red Bull junior, is he? He was brought in relatively late, but he's very much part of that program. And he's a bit of a piece of the furniture, isn't he? There now, I think he'll probably be forming a very long, fruitful partnership there. So I don't think there'll be anybody else in that seat.
Yeah.
Next to him, I've gone for Liam Lawson.
Not Sergio.
Very highly.
Not Sergio Perez.
No, I've got Checo. Do you know, I've still got Checo in the sport, just somewhere else. But yeah, Lawson. I just think I'm thinking about this earlier, and I think he'll be by 2026. He'll have probably had if he does, because let's assume he doesn't race next season because of all the stupidness that's happening with season stuff for next season. He will probably race 2025, and I think he'll demonstrate enough in that year to get the move to Red Bull, but he'll still be green enough that like there is a very clear hierarchy, and someone that young and that green will probably be okay with that.
Yeah.
Whereas like the danger for Red Bull is if they go for a known quantity who's sort of at the peak of their powers, that they want to genuinely challenge Max Verstappen, they'll find themselves with a similar kind of Ricardo Verstappen or Vettel Weber situation that I think they've decided they definitely don't want in their lives ever again.
Yeah.
Which makes me think they'll probably go for a younger driver. But in this case, they'll go for a younger driver that's probably got enough pace to potentially challenge Max on occasion, but certainly not over the course of a season in what will probably be his second full year in the sport. So, yeah, I think that one, for me, makes most sense for them, the way they run their organisation.
It tells you a lot about how well Liam Lawson has done in this period he stood in for Daniel Ricciardo, that he's been even, we're even having this conversation about being a potential Red Bull driver. I think, previous to this, I don't think he had a standout junior career. He didn't win F2. So it's, fair play to him to have got himself in the conversation. I think you're right. He's definitely of that sort of Red Bull stable, looks of the best option they've got as a number two to Max, I think. And I think you're right. I think he probably is a strong option. I've also put him down as Max's partner, but I also think there is an off chance that Red Bull do something quite bold and they try and get Norris, because I think there is definitely an interest in Norris. He's talked about in the past about how he was almost joined up at the Red Bull Junior Driver Program. If the problem I think with Red Bull going for Norris is that Norris is apparently into a very long contract till the end of 2025, and apparently it's like he's fully committed to that contract. And so maybe at the end of 2025, if McLaren still aren't winning races, he might think for his career, right, I've got to jump ship and I'll go to Red Bull, who've won multiple titles. That could drive his thinking, and I think Red Bull could think, it could be quite exciting having two standout drivers. But then you're right, I think Red Bull do seem to like to keep the ship quite stable and don't like to bring two. They don't do the Mercedes or the Ferrari lineup where they have two outstanding drivers. They kind of have one much better and one that's definitely number two.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Personally, I think that would be quite exciting for the sport to have Norris with Max to see how they fight, and especially as Norris seems to be full of admiration for Max. It'd be interesting to see how they were as teammates. I think it would get quite fiery. But maybe the safer option is that they'll just go for Lawson because he's a known quantity and they know that he'll be the number two, whereas Norris might try and challenge Max.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Norris moving to Red Bull would be exactly what the sport needs, and that's exactly why it won't happen.
Yeah. I think I saw on Twitter saying that they're like, someone in Red Bull was saying that, or there was rumours that F1 had said to Red Bull, can you hire Lando to make the sport more exciting? So you've got two top tier drivers. I don't see Christian Horner following the rules of or following the directions of Formula One to go and hire a certain driver. I think that's just Twitter speculation.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think it'll be interesting to see if he does end up there. Should we move on to Ferrari?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Who have you gone for?
Again, pretty boring. Sainz and Leclerc. I really wanted to move Leclerc somewhere else, but just having a look at the roster, I mean, likely locations: Mercedes, possibly if Lewis retired, but that doesn't feel particularly likely either. He seems just incredibly driven and at the top of his game, so perhaps not. Maybe McLaren if Norris moved, but again, that's a pretty sideways move, I think.
That would be interesting seeing him at McLaren. Would that almost be seen as a step down from the heights of Ferrari and the historic of Ferrari?
Not right now,
No,
based
true,
on form.
true.
I don't know. I mean, a lot will depend on all of this. A lot of this will depend on how teams perform in 24-25. So that's why it's always this, like, we'll probably look back on this in 2 years' time and just loll all the way through the list, because some team will come out of nowhere and be really quick and develop a fast car, and suddenly, drivers will want to go and drive for them and things, and vice versa. A big team will get it really wrong. And there'll be some unhappy, very talented drivers somewhere. So yeah, it's all a bit of a meme, isn't it? Really, this, but yeah, I think McLaren, maybe Aston Martin, Honda. I could see potentially they're making a good case for getting Charles in, but nowhere else really. Yeah, but on balance, I think based on the fact that they seem to work pretty well together. Yeah. Charles has a really close connection to Ferrari. Sainz is definitely trusted and seemingly driving particularly well at the moment as well. I don't think that's necessarily going to be a problem. I don't think they're going to see an opportunity for an upgrade necessarily either way. So from both camps' perspectives, I think it's probably likely that they'll stay for the longer term. So yeah, I've stuck with Sainz and Charles. How about you?
Yeah, I've gone for the same. I think especially for Sainz, I think for him it feels like getting to Ferrari's like the peak of his that's the best of the best for him. Like he doesn't want to go anywhere higher. I think he thinks that is the best team. There were rumors that Audi, as part of the Sauber sort of takeover, were interested in sort of bringing in Carlos Sainz. But I saw, I think it was his agent was saying he's very much keen to sort of get a contract extension at Ferrari. So I'd be surprised to see him leave Ferrari. I think even if they were struggling, I still think he would stick to that because he think it's the peak for him. So yeah, nice and stable. Let's move on to Aston Martin. They'll be partnered with Honda exclusively in 2026. What are you predicting for their lineup?
So I think Lizard Killer will retain the seat and will still
Fernando
be
Alonso, the Lizard Killer.
Yeah, he will still be kicking around the sport in 2026. Although I feel like that probably will be his last year. I don't know if he'll race much beyond that, but people have been saying that about Alonso for a while now. So he keeps going and keeps performing. So yeah, I think there's a good shout he'll still be there. And partnering him, I've gone for Alex Albon.
Ooh, that's a bit of a curveball.
Yeah, so I just think I was looking at just based on pure pace. I feel like Albon is a good driver, but I don't think he's in that. I don't think he's in a kind of Max Verstappen, Lewis, Charles Leclerc, Piastri, Norris conversation, personally.
Right.
And given those drivers are very much in situ in those seats anyway, it feels quite unlikely to me that Albon's going to be given a shot in one of those top teams. But if you're Aston Martin Honda and you're looking at somebody to come in to partner Alonso, you want someone who's reliable, quick, going to score regular points, and probably has the pace to win a race if you develop the car particularly well. But then again, Alonso's most likely going to retain your number one spot if he's in the team because it's Fernando Alonso. It just makes quite a bit of sense for me. I just think, yeah, he's in that bracket of driver that I think would do a very good job for Aston Martin. So a lot's going to depend on their ambition and what they do for 2026. I mean, there's lots of chat they're going to go big and try and get another big name alongside Alonso, but that's easier said than done. But yeah, they're very much one of those teams that, like, if they get it right in 24 or 25, I could see them getting somebody better than Albon potentially, and maybe even better than Alonso. But absent of any data there, it's quite difficult to make that prediction. But yeah, Albon just stood out for me as a driver that could be in that kind of regularly driving for or driving for Aston Martin, regularly challenging for points finishes and stuff, and regularly getting through to Q3. He feels like a pretty safe bet for them in that situation.
Yeah. So interesting. So I also think the Lizard Killer will also be there, but I've used that same criteria and I've come up with a different choice. So I think it'd be Yuki Tsunoda that partners him, because Yuki is talented, quick, and has also got that sort of can score points. I don't know. We've not really seen race win ability sort of pace yet from him, nor that. But I think by that point he'll have been in AlphaTauri or in the Red Bull family for quite a few years. I think Honda might push for him to be signed as they want a Japanese driver driving their Japanese engines. I think that could be quite a big influence as well. And he could be like say a good sort of option to go alongside someone more experienced. I mean, an outlandish, crazy idea if you're right that if Aston get it together, could they tempt back Sebastian Vettel to partner Alonso?
Not for Aston Martin, but I have got Sebastian Vettel making a return for another team.
Else. Oh, interesting. Yes. I'm intrigued to see where you've earmarked that. But it wouldn't surprise me that you're right if they went for someone of real pedigree to go along to be so they had a really stellar lineup. Obviously, we've mentioned two drivers there for Aston Martin, and 3 or 4 drivers actually for Aston Martin, but we've not mentioned Daddy's favourite boy, Lance Stroll. Where do you see him going?
The beach.
The beach.
Starting a tennis career.
And do you see him? When do you see him? Do you think that'll be that year he goes?
No, I think if Aston Martin have any sense, they'll make the change for next season, just based on his form this year and his general attitude the last couple of races. I just think they must know now it's got to be done.
Yeah, interesting.
Can I ask you a question about Albon then? So I've got Albon sort of penciled for Aston Martin, and you've got him semi-penciled for Mercedes if Hamilton retires. If Hamilton doesn't retire, do you think Albon will still be in the sport? And if so, where do you think he'll be racing?
Yeah, so yes, I think he'll definitely be in the sport. I think he's shown he's definitely a top driver to have. I think his comeback into the sport with Williams has been really, really impressive. I think it's getting better and better, and I think he's, for this season, I think I put him down as one of the drivers of the season for his performances in that Williams. Good question, because I feel like he could very much easily stay at Williams, and that could be he could be there for many, many years.
Yeah.
Or I don't disagree. I think Aston could poach him as someone that's sort of like say reliable, can score good points, and is quick. Yeah, I think he would be one of the most. I think he'll be in demand if he leaves Williams. I think any team above him could go, and I think that could be a big team like Mercedes, or it could be in the midfield above them. At the moment, they could be interested in Alex. I think he's definitely an attractive option. I'd be shocked if he was out of the sport again for an extended period. I think he's really proven that he's one of the best sort of midfield drivers at the moment. And he's probably just outside of that grouping of Piastri, Norris, Max, Charles, and Lewis.
Yeah, agreed. Okay.
Shall we move on to McLaren then?
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
Another pretty boring one. Well, I mean, Piastri signed. Obviously, he's contracted there anyway till 26 on till 26. So I don't think he's likely to go anywhere. And I think it'll probably still be Norris. I mean, I'd love to say Norris will get his move to Red Bull and partner Max, or we'll see some fun Ferrari shenanigans, and we'll potentially see Charles and Norris move each direction, as it were. I actually think Leclerc and Piastri could be a really, really good lineup, but yeah, I just don't. I can't see it happening. It would be great. I just can't see Norris getting that move. And Norris is only going to move upwards, right? He's not going to move. I don't think he's going to move horizontally. And I think Ferrari probably would be a bit of a horizontal move based on the current situation. So you're talking about Mercedes and Red Bull probably.
Yeah.
And yeah, as I said, I just can't see Red Bull taking that risk, and I don't think Mercedes drivers will change by then. So I think he'll probably stick with McLaren for a bit longer.
And also, if you think of the current trajectory of McLaren,
yeah,
you'd hope, if I was Lando Norris right now, I'd hope to be think by 2025, I'm winning races.
Yeah.
And so why quit a good thing when you're in going into new engine regulation? You'd probably be pretty confident that your team can get sorted and get you a competitive car. I've gone for the same. I think unless he goes to Red Bull, I think it'll be Piastri and Norris. Unless maybe that could be the home for Albon. They have picked up.
Yeah,
similar move to when they signed Sainz after he left Renault. Should we move on to Renault, or shall we say Alpine?
Oui.
Do you think they'll still keep their full French lineup, or do you think they'll do something a bit different?
No, I do not.
Ooh.
So I've gone for Pierre Gasly to stay, but I've gone for Daniel Ricciardo to partner him.
Oh wow! A return to
Renault, yeah, a return to Renault, and
do you think they'll still be called Renault, or do you think they'll go back to being called Renault, or do you think they'll still be called Alpine?
Oh, I don't know. Who knows? I mean, trying to predict what
Alpine
the
Renault.
Yeah, trying to predict what the Renault board are going to do. I mean, there's some chat they may not even be in the sport, right?
Seriously?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because they've been obviously they've been a bit up. I mean, I don't want to say up and down, but they've been a bit of a meme, haven't they, for a while now? And yeah, there's some chat that the sort of Renault board are a bit less interested in the kind of Formula One side of things than previously, but I think the 2026 regulations will represent a good opportunity for them potentially to try and get back in the mix. The main problem they've got is the engines. They've just got to figure out a way to get them on par with their rivals, because until that happens, it's just going to continue to struggle. So yeah, there was a bit of chat in kind of F1 fandom Twitter world that potentially Alpine maybe won't be around in 26, but we shall see. I'm going to proceed on the assumption they will be. And yeah, I think Ricciardo will be very much back in the sport properly by then. Whether or not he gets to drive at AlphaTauri or not, I don't know. But I think he'll have done enough to keep a seat in the sport for sure. And he has proven to be a historically quite a consistent performer. Obviously did very well for Renault while he was there. And I think him and Gasly have got a particularly good relationship as well. So I feel like they'd be quite a good driver lineup.
Nice.
So yeah, that's what I've gone for. But I assume you've gone for Ocon sticking around with Renault. Oh, with Alpine, yeah. Yeah,
I have. I mean, that's interesting about Ricciardo there, because you're right. I think he'll probably get to a point where he doesn't want to be in the he won't, if he doesn't get a Red Bull team seat, he'll probably want to look around, because he won't just want to stay in the junior team. So it'll be interesting to see what he sort of what options he's got available. So I think, yeah, and Alpine might pay quite well as well. So I could see him go back, because I think at the end of last season, when he knew he was leaving McLaren, I think he priced himself out of quite a few seats. Like I think he wanted like 10 million to go and race for Williams or for Haas. I think that was in the Drive to Survive. So I think maybe Alpine can pay him what he wants.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to see where you think Ocon's going to go to. Then we'll come to that after the break. But yeah, I think for me, I think Ocon and Gasly, they're two young drivers, both French, and if Alpine, Renault still want to stay in the sport, they'll probably want to keep that for their brand to have two young drivers. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what influence the new consortium that came in and bought a stake of Alpine have over the team, especially if Renault are sort of having doubts about owning a team, because as we saw with the valuation of that team when Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney and Michael B. Jordan all bought a stake, like a Formula One team is worth a lot of money now, and they could make some sweet money trying to sell it to someone else. So yeah, that would be one to watch. If they go, then who knows who takes over and does the lineup. But I'm sticking on the assumption that Alpine stick around and want to keep the French flag drivers racing for them.
Okay, very good. All right.
Well, I think we've covered about half the grid. Obviously, we've got, it's just over half the grid, but we'll cover why we think there's going to be more than just 10 in the second half. We'll take a quick break and come back with the rest of our choices shortly. Welcome back from the break. Hope you had a jolly old time. So in the first half, we did the top 6 teams and their driver lineups and our predictions for 2026. We're now going to do the rest of the grid plus an additional one, which we'll come to later. So Sam, let's jump straight back into it. AlphaTauri, Red Bull Junior team. That we understand that Red Bull are going to take them a bit more seriously and treat them more than just a feeder team.
Yep.
And there's apparently there's going to be a big sponsor for next year. It's either going to be Hugo Boss or Adidas. So that'd be interesting if either of those become that, and if that changes the direction of the sport. With that in mind, and with a growing AlphaTauri team, what are you predicting for the lineup?
So I think they'll retain Tsunoda. I don't think Tsunoda's done enough to get a move personally anywhere better. I mean, there are a couple of teams maybe in that slightly faster, I guess, or slightly bigger bracket up top towards kind of Alpine, Aston Martin territory, maybe, but I just don't think he's done enough to warrant one of those moves yet. That may change. Again, so in the same way that there are teams to watch for the next couple of years, they're definitely drivers, and Tsunoda's one of them because he's entering his prime now. But I think based on the performances of Lawson so far, he just looks like the kind of driver that's going to end up driving a Red Bull sooner rather than later. So that's why I've got him staying with AlphaTauri, and then I've gone for Checo. I think he'll still be around. He'll be a safe pair of hands, and he's well thought of in the organisation. And yeah, I think Checo will still be driving, and AlphaTauri will be his home.
Wow, that is a surprise. I thought you would have binned him off from the sport. But do you think he would accept going down? Because I'm guessing at some point soon he's in your sort of to get there. He's going to take a demotion, right?
Yeah.
Do you think he would accept that, or do you think he'd be like, oh, you know what, I'd rather just leave the sport? And do you think Red Bull would still think he's good enough to race for them as an organisation?
I think so. I feel like there are definitely situations, and we've seen it a few times before, right, where someone goes and drives for Red Bull. Now, traditionally, I admit this is usually a younger driver, goes there, struggles, and then goes and drives for AlphaTauri and does a really good job, a la Gasly, for example. I think Checo will probably be in that bracket. I'm not saying he's going to go and like set the world alight driving for AlphaTauri, but I think he will still be a very solid Grand Prix driver. And Tsunoda can be a bit, I don't know, twitchy, I suppose. I think they'll probably want a steady hand and a steady point scorer alongside him. I did half wonder about Checo maybe going to Haas and having a lovely time with Gunter and the crew and whatever. But
that'd be quality.
Yeah, that was the only other option I thought for him, because I do think he'll still be in the sport. I think he'll still want to drive in 2026. He's not that old, so I just thought, it feels like AlphaTauri would be a good home for him. He gets to stay in the organisation. He is generally very well liked. And yeah, I think he'll be that kind of solid point scoring influence, that because I don't see AlphaTauri being anywhere other than at best sort of middle of mid table.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like he'd be a solid bet. What about you then? Have you gone for two different drivers or one different? What's your thinking for AlphaTauri?
I've got if Liam Lawson doesn't get to Red Bull, I think he'll be there. That could be his second full season in the sport, and I think he could just be a reliable option. And then I've just looked through like their Red Bull junior driver team, and I think Jack Crawford, who's doing quite well in F2, I could see him being promoted into that. I still think they'll want to keep that pipeline going. Although saying that Red Bull have sort of shopped around, we saw it this year with Nick De Vries coming in. He wasn't a Red Bull junior as well. But I think they'll return to form and they'll want to promote within. And I think they need to. What's the whole point of having a driver academy if you're not getting people into Formula One? So I think they'll do that with Jack Crawford.
Okay, yeah, no, I would like to see him in the sport. I don't know whether he'll be there 26 or maybe the year after or 28, but yeah, he's definitely on. It looks like he's definitely on the right path. So
yeah,
I could see that.
I should say that a lot of my choices now, there's a lot of new people coming to Formula One, which is probably quite bold because you don't really see an influx of new drivers every season. So
I think teams are just. I do genuinely think teams are trending towards being a bit more conservative as well these days. Yeah. Like you just don't see, like many rookies given that long.
No. Well, if you look at the recent rookies that come in, you've had Nick De Vries that struggled and wasn't given enough time. You've had Logan Sargent who's struggling. You've had Nikita Mazepin who was a nightmare. You had Mick Schumacher that cost Haas millions of pounds. Like the only recent rookie that's been good in the sport that I can think of the top, well, two actually. Zhou has been reliable and been all right, but kind of don't know how much higher he can go in ability and speed. And then Oscar Piastri, who's absolutely storming it. So that that's 2 out of 7 drivers that have been a success, and they've been rookies or new people to the sport. So I think people have probably seen that. I think it's probably safer to take, to bring back people like Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg is 2 examples because they know the sport and their experience. But maybe Formula One needs to look itself like to, because I've seen one of the things that James Vowles has criticised the sport, saying, if you're a rookie now, it's such a step up from F2, and the amount of time they get in the car to familiarise themselves is minimal to what they would have done 10 years ago, 15 years ago. They would have got so many miles and so many hours in the car before the season started, whereas throughout the season, they're still trying to learn how to drive a Formula One car. It's not even excel in a Formula One car, they'll just learn to get used to it. I think maybe Formula One needs to be a bit more generous to rookies to give them an allowance to get more time in the car just so that they can get up to speed quicker.
Yeah, or at least find a way to let them drive the previous year's car. I think that would be a good way of doing it, because the challenge they've got is if they open it up and say, go by all means have a load more extra testing days for young drivers, teams will abuse that as we saw historically.
And like testing, weren't they?
Yeah, like you remember when we talked about when we talked about one of my favourite drivers, Mick Hakkinen, one of the things he always used to moan about was the amount of testing they had to do when he was driving at McLaren. It was like thousands of hours worth of testing. Whereas these days they're obviously really limited, and that is a double-edged sword, right? On the one hand, you stop teams from developing cars so they become almost borderline perfection and too fast, or you potentially don't. But alongside doing that, you also limit yourselves in terms of drivers having time, and that is the big issue, as you say, for F2 drivers in particular coming into the sport. Apart from Oscar Piastri, obviously, who's awesome in every way.
The boy wonder.
Yes.
Very good. So shall we move on to Haas then? We've kind of touched them a little bit. Who have you picked for Haas?
So I think they'll keep Magnussen.
Yeah, me too.
Bit of a stalwart, and although he is currently being outperformed by Hülkenberg, I don't think that will last forever, and I also think Hülkenberg will probably stop at some point in the next couple of years because he is 38. And I've gone for Djokovic at Haas.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, I think Djokovic is on the list, isn't he? A kind of potential for Aston Martin. But if I was Aston Martin thinking about either an F2 champion or Alex Albon, that kind of vibe, I know which one I'm picking. And I'd probably also
similar mindset. Yeah, similar thing as well.
Yeah. But I think Djokovic will be. He's still a really interesting talent, and Haas, although Gunther Steiner has moaned a lot about it in the past, that they are a team that generally will try and take a bit of a risk on a rookie if they can. And I think in Magnussen, they'll obviously have one particularly good sort of, I guess, experienced driver that can do a lot of the guidance, and then maybe they can take a bit of the hit when it comes to someone like Djokovic. But I don't know. I think Djokovic has done enough for me to get a drive in Formula One, and Haas feels like a relatively sensible place for him to start. It's just a question of whether Steiner and and Jean will allow them to take a risk on another young driver after that what they had with Mick and others. But I think by 26, I could see Drogovic being on that list. I think he may well be one of those drivers that, similar to De Vries or somebody like that, will get a go for a few races because of something, and he will demonstrate in those few races that he's ready, and someone will give him a drive.
We'd almost want to see like Lance Stroll just set out a race or two, and just to see the scale in comparison
Yes.
of performances to sort of advertise himself, because he did incredibly well in F2. He won F2 quite quickly and quite easily, and he won. So I can't remember how many races, but I remember when I went to the Barcelona Grand Prix that year when he was in F2, he won the race by a good length. So he's clearly very talented. I've not picked him for Haas. I've picked someone else, but I have got him on my 2026 lineup. So I'll reveal where I've put Dragovic a bit. But I've gone for Frederick Vesti. He's a Formula One Mercedes in their driver academy. He's doing very well in F2 at the moment. I think he's P2 overall in the championship. I think Agent Toto will be able to get him a good deal and get him into the sport. And so, I think you might be able to persuade Haas to take a risk on him if he's not Mick Schumacher.
Okay, yeah, you've definitely gone big on the new young drivers, fresh blood coming into the sport, haven't you?
Yeah,
good. I like bigger.
It's just the start. This, I did say every pick was bold, and it only gets more and more bold as we go on.
Okay, all right. I'm excited to hear some of these. Where do you want to go next?
Let's go Williams. Who have you picked for Williams?
Okay, I've gone semi-conservative with Williams, so I've gone Valtteri Bottas.
Ooh,
I think he'll still be driving.
Wow.
Yeah, I think he'll still be driving. I think Williams, as with all these teams, I think some of them will be willing to take a risk on a rookie, but the ones that do will want an experienced head next to them, 100%. Bottas represents that experienced head. Obviously, Williams have a very good relationship with Mercedes. Historically, like Bottas will have quite a good working relationship with a lot of people that work there. I think James Vowles, among others.
And also, he was at Williams before he went to Mercedes, so it'd be like return home for him.
Exactly, yeah, and I think that'll be we're in the twilight of his career very much, so I think that'll probably be his last or second to last season potentially. But yeah, I think he'll go back to Williams before he retires. And again, he's just a safe bet, safe point scorer, probably safe performer. And alongside him, I've actually gone for Mick Schumacher.
Oh, you think Mick will finally get back into the sport?
I think he'll get back in, yeah, because again, his Mercedes links, like he's a reserve driver. It sounds like he's been doing a pretty good job in testing and stuff. I feel like maybe not next year. I mean, I'm not sure what they do about Sargent, whether they stick with him or twist or not. But I think maybe 24, but more likely 2025. I think we'll see Mick Schumacher return to the sport, probably for Williams, and I suspect he'll do enough in that season, probably to retain his seat for 26. That's my prediction for them.
I think if you look at the grid, the only place I can see Schumacher going is Williams. I think that's the only way. That's his only way back in sport, because he's never driving for Mercedes, right?
No.
I don't see anyone else taking a risk on him. I can see I see you've gone big on the Mercedes sort of link up with James Vowles and sort of being of the Mercedes family. Very interesting. Very interesting. I've gone different and bold.
Okay.
So I've got this where I've gone for
William
Dragovic.
on Williams. Here we go.
I've gone Dragovic. I just think that they could be quite a good team. I think James Vowles could be. I think if Sargent goes, I could see Dragovic going there for next season and just staying there for a couple of years, and maybe even leaving the Aston Martin driver program to go and race for Williams. I just think he'll, similar to Albon, they'll just get an opportunity and then they'll improve and they'll feel really part of the family and they'll just stay around. So I could see him going there. And I think he'd be good.
I'm glad we've both gone for Dragovic in the sport though, because I feel he feels like he deserves a shot, doesn't it?
Yeah, me too. I think he'd be much better than Lance Stroll, but if Lance Stroll wasn't his father's son, I don't think anyone would pick him to be in the sport. But anyway, that's not about Lance Stroll.
Okay. Alongside Dragovic then?
Yeah, alongside Dragovic. I've gone incredibly bold. I've gone for Jamie Chadwick.
Oh,
wow! Twice she won the W Series. Was it twice?
Twice, I think. Yeah,
twice, back-to-back champion before it disbanded. And she's out racing in IndyCar at the moment, doing a good job. She's already on their Williams driver program. I just think the pressure and the demand for a female driver is just going to build over the next couple of years, and she seems to be the standout of the female drivers currently that are in the sort of Formula One conversation. if I was Williams, I'd give her a few practice sessions, just see how she does. But I think it'd be such a smart move by Williams. I think that not they should do it for the publicity and the press, but it would go down very well. History would be made, and also I think she's proven that she's incredibly talented, incredibly quick. Like, I think she's done very well in IndyCar, and obviously she's won multiple championships as well. So I'd love to see Jamie Chadwick come to the sport. I think she'd be a real success, and it's overdue that we have some female drivers in the sport.
Wow. Okay. I mean, I would love to see that. That would be fantastic. I hate to be the
Go on.
the dampener on that. So I think she is really good. I just think the odds of Williams putting themselves in a situation where they're basically putting basically a rookie in Drugovich. I mean, maybe Drugovich gets a drive with Aston Martin or something, but I kind of feel like if Drugovich is going to get a drive with Aston Martin next year, he's not going to do any worse than Stroll. He'll probably do enough to keep the seat. But if he doesn't, I think he'll probably end up joining the sport in 25 or 26, and then it'll be a bit late, and he'll still be a bit of a rookie. And then you throw Chadwick in as well, who is really good, clearly, but not driven Formula One yet. It's quite high risk, I think. And my small C conservative comment stands. I think even Williams, as much as we love them for their willingness to put rookies and stuff in the cars, I think they're looking a much more serious outfit now than they were a couple of years ago, and that might make things a bit more difficult to do that kind of thing. But I would still love to see it. It'd be amazing. Like, if it happens, we'll quote this podcast. Like, all the content will be excellent.
Yeah. I feel like Jamie Chadwick should come on the podcast if I predict her getting into the sport. Then I feel like she owes us that. I was gonna say, imagine what odds I would get if I went to Ladbrokes now and said, what are the odds on Jamie Chadwick racing for Williams in 2026? I reckon it would be high.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But you got to make bold predictions because you never know what will happen. Okay, I like Williams. We've both gone in different directions, but we've both got some interesting picks there. Let's move on to the final team that's still on the grid, but they will be rebranded bigger and better with the backing of Audi, with Audi engines. What are you thinking? I feel like they could be a real mix, or they could be the same. But what have you gone for?
So this is where my Sebastian Vettel return.
Oh wow! German driver comes to return to the sport to race for a German manufacturer that's not Mercedes.
Yes, I think
so.
Wow,
that is bold. I like that. I like that a lot.
So and I know it's such a cliche that Vettel has walked the kind of Michael Schumacher path, but it would be extremely Michael Schumacher to retire from the sport to do some other stuff, and then come back for a new team that happens to also be a German works team.
Yeah, true.
I could see Vettel doing that and then coming back for a year or two as Audi establish themselves in the sport again. Reliable performer, clearly got good pedigree, 4-time world champion, etc. I think the pay packet from Audi will be pretty chunky as well. I could see that happening. And alongside him, I've gone for Esteban Ocon.
Wow,
who I think will just have had enough of Alpine. To be honest with you, that's my main thinking is he'll have had enough of Alpine. Audi will be in the market for a good, reliable, still relatively young, and probably in that, like, there's a lot of upside bracket, I think, with Ocon, particularly if you put him in a faster car than he's in at the moment. And we've talked about him before about potential being an underrated driver and stuff. Where that was the episode you picked Gasly, wasn't it? That was quite a fun one to discuss.
Yeah.
I just think he'll be in the market for a team just like that. They'll be in a market for a driver just like that. It could be a really good match, and I think Vettel and Ocon would be quite a good team as well.
Quite a fiery bunch, though. I think they could clash quite a bit.
So yes, but I think Vettel returning to the sport, he will see himself as a kind of, I guess, a paternal figure. Probably, I think he will. It won't be like Vettel's coming back to compete for world championships. I don't think. Unless, I mean, who knows? I mean, there's a lot of chat about Audi, see what they do with the engines and stuff. They might produce a really amazing package in 2026. And if, let's put it this way, a lot of the grid will know about it if they are, in exactly the same way that Mercedes, they knew that within a couple of years of Mercedes coming back into the sport, they were going to be getting pretty close to race wins and stuff. And they made a good case for as it was bringing Hamilton in. Now, Audi won't necessarily be able to do that from the beginning, but I think Vettel and Ocon would be a very good, safe start, just like Schumacher and Rosberg were for Mercedes when they came into the sport.
Yeah, I like that with Vettel. I suppose my two thoughts are, him coming in is a very smart move in sort of trying to teach the team how to become race winners, because he's
Yep.
been at Ferrari, he's been at Red Bull, and he brought that to Aston Martin, and he was credited for sort of Aston Martin's surge at the start of the season. He had helped with them on that journey to that.
Mm.
So I like that, sort of bringing that expertise. I suppose my only concern with Vettel, though, is his performance really dropped off his last couple of years in the sport.
Mm.
And you'd need a guarantee to see that he was better than he was. But also, it wasn't just his pace that dropped off. He also was making quite a lot of mistakes. I remember his time at Ferrari towards the end was, lots of penalties and lots of errors.
Mm.
You kind of hope you weren't getting that drive, and you kind of getting someone that was close to sort of being like as quick, or just quick, but just as consistent as he was when he was at the start of Ferrari and in Red Bull. So yeah, but I think that's interesting. I've
What
gone.
about you, Ferrari? Yeah, what have you gone for?
I've gone different. So I've gone for Danny Ricciardo. I think they'll pay him well, and I think he could be quite a good, reliable person to go for. And also, he's good with the brands, good with the sponsors. So I thought that could be quite popular, and he's experienced. So I think that could go down quite well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I've gone for my second choice is Theo Porcher,
Mm-hmm.
who is the Alfa Romeo reserve driver at the moment, but he's currently leading the F2 driver standings. So he probably will become the F2 champion. Touch wood.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good lineup if he especially can get some experience of Formula One in the next couple of years. We don't know what's going to happen with Bottas and Zhou, so he could get a seat earlier. But I think he could be quite a good young, fiery option to go alongside someone a bit more experienced. I definitely think that's where they'll go for. Yeah, I'd quite like to see another new person in the sport, especially someone that's doing well in F2. Yeah,
Okay.
so yeah,
Like that.
I've gone different. I was like I said, I brought a lot of new people into the sport.
No, I like that. So I've got Porsche returning to sport, but not for any of the teams we've talked about so far. So yeah, I think it'll be in.
You've teased that well, because the final team we've not mentioned. We've covered all the ones on the grid, but we're both assuming here that Andretti are going to make it onto the grid.
Yeah.
It looks like they've just got to get past the Formula One teams. I think they will fight, but I understand it's going to be quite hard for them to object to a new team arriving. So we should have Andretti arrive into the sport. And Michael Andretti's been very successful with his teams in IndyCar, and he'll come across to Formula One and have an all-American team alongside Haas. Who have you gone for the lineup then?
So I'll just say before we get to the drivers that if the Formula One teams block Andretti coming into the sport, it would be an absolute farce.
It would.
Yeah, they've been through some pretty rigorous, a very rigorous process with the FIA, and even some of the drivers, they're not speaking out of turn, but they're saying like, why would they oppose to having another team on the grid? Like they want more cars to race. So,
well, you'll be surprised to hear it's money that's dictating all, because they've only got to pay like 200 million. I think, well, only 200 million, but they've got to pay like a lot of money to enter. But teams think that should be much higher because the value of Formula One teams has increased on when they sign that agreement. So just change it once Andretti signed. And also, I think they're worried about the money being split, and a further way, and that means their share all goes down, which is very selfish of them.
I agree.
I always think it's not in the interest of the sport for the teams to decide who should join them.
Yeah, totally. And if they want to build the sport in America, that's good for everybody. I feel like the business case for Andretti is pretty strong, to be honest with you.
Well, he's bringing Cadillac, right?
Yeah, exactly. That'd be massive. If they can get Cadillac on board, involving building engines, that'd be unreal. So, yeah, the arguments against are pure greed, and that's not enough for my money. So,
I agree.
For drivers, I've gone Theo Pourchaire. I think he'll be in. Nice. He does seem really, really good, and I kind of hope he gets a drive somewhere before 2026. It'd be a bit of a shame if he's stuck waiting around for a couple of years, but I'm going to base it on the assumption that he gets a drive somewhere in 2025, but only does a year, and then Andretti pick him up. And I've gone for Alex Palou from IndyCar, because I feel like they'll want American representation in some form or another, and he's the best of them. So
yeah, well, he was very close to getting the spare seat in AlphaTauri last year, and then it was all to do with super license points that he couldn't get into the sport, and then I think Red Bull decided to go in a different direction with Nick de Vries. I've also got Alex Palou joining Andretti. I think he's a standout, probably IndyCar driver that would come across, and it makes sense for Andretti to bring someone from IndyCar across, especially that's his background and history, and also probably quite good to break down that barrier, because we've not seen any IndyCar drivers during the sport. We've seen a lot of drivers go off to go and become an IndyCar afterwards. You know, people like Marcus Ericsson and Roman Grosjean. They've went after their
Takuma
careers.
Sato as well.
Yeah,
Yep.
and they've been very successful there as well.
Mm.
So yeah, I think Alex Palou, and then I think the other one, I think sticking to that theme, I think Andretti will bring in Pato O'Ward, who is very successful in IndyCar. He's also a McLaren junior driver.
Yeah.
He's on their driver program, and he's also, which is a massive credit to him, and also makes him probably quite attractive for Andretti. He's also done lots of testing in a McLaren car, an F1 car. So, and I think he's down to do some at the end of this season as well. So, I think he might have to wait a couple more years to get into the sport, but I think I can see Andretti going for 2 IndyCar picks and just.
That would be super high risk, but awesome.
It'd be high risk, but I feel like he could be vindicated if he's by showing that that they are similar single seater cars, and they are just as talented. So I'd quite like to see that. I think I'd rate that quite a bit from Andretti to come and bring in two drivers that have got such experience in IndyCar and just that'd be like, yeah, we're here to do things a bit differently.
Okay, very good. So if I've got this right, then looking at the drivers we've decided will not be racing in 26, we've got 4 that are the same, and then you've got 2 additional ones. So I've got Hulkenberg, retired, Stroll, Beach, slash WTA, Zhou Guanyu, which I think is quite an interesting one that we've both picked him not to have a drive, because I do agree. I think like he's not really demonstrated very much. He's had a fair bit of time in the sport now.
He's been okay, and that's
exactly
not good. That's not good enough to stay in the sport, I don't think.
Exactly, yeah. He's not done anything. Like if he'd picked up a podium, even at least there'd be something there on the record, and people would be like, yeah, okay, he's picked up a podium in a pretty poor car. But yeah, like he's scored a few points here and there, which isn't really enough. And then obviously Logan Sargent, neither of us fancy him to continue in 26, which is fair enough. But yeah, so what the 2 additional ones
are Perez and Bottas.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I can. Yeah, they're both they're both in the twilight of their career, aren't they?
Yeah.
So I could see them potentially not racing 26. I just got a feeling they'll stick around.
I think Perez, for him, it hinges on how his time at Red Bull concludes, because it's clear he's not going to be there for forever. He's definitely not going to be there at 2026. I'll be amazed if he's still there at 2026. If he leaves at the end of this season, there just won't be any vacancies unless Red Bull shuffle it around to keep him in the sport. But I just think they'll just be ruthless, and I just think they'll just promote either Lawson or Ricciardo, and the other one will just sit in with Yuki. And then I think he'll just struggle to come back to the sport. And then I don't know, but then he does bring money. He's backed by a lot of Mexican businesses, so that is an attractive option. I mean, we've not really talked about that option that people bring to the sport. There's people here we've picked that are new into sport that are doing well because they're either on driver programs or doing well in junior series. Maybe at the moment we don't really know this well enough, but like there's no one that we see in the junior feeders that are just going to be bought into the sport. People like Nicholas Latifi or Mazepin, that we could be caught up by those. But I don't know. I just don't see Perez being able to get back into the sport. I think this year has been so damaging to his reputation and where he's at, and I think people would be taking a risk on him. And it could be a risk that pays off. Look at the comebacks that Gasly and Albon have had in their careers after being dropped by Red Bull, and Ricciardo as well. They've gone on to have good careers.
Yeah.
And Bottas, I just think Bottas he's on a downward trajectory, and was at Mercedes and just seems to be going on that way since. And I just think if you're Audi, you just think, well, he's just turning up and just doing okay, and we want something more than that. So I think there'll be more attractive options to Bottas. So he'll just see himself out of the sport.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah,
very good. That's a good solid set of predictions there.
Yeah, I mean, when we get to the 2026 season preview show, we'll definitely dig up our notes from this episode and just compare to see how accurate we were and how far off we were. But I think we've talked about a lot of new drivers that we've never mentioned before, and I think just talking about new drivers and a new freshening up lineup, I think would be really exciting for Formula One, and it's probably due a bit of a freshen up as well. And we'll see that with some people to retire in the next couple of years. But yeah, if Jamie Chadwick gets into Formula One, that'd be amazing.
It would be amazing. Oh, it'd be so good. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, that's a nice way to end the pod.
Yeah, definitely. Well, fingers crossed for her. Well, fingers crossed for female drivers in general, to be honest, over the next couple of years, given what's happened with the W Series. Yeah,
and the F1 Academy kind of seems a bit under the radar.
Yeah, they've not. Yeah, I mean, it's still very new, isn't it?
Yeah, true.
A lot to prove the next 12 months. True. But fingers crossed they can. All right, thanks very much for joining us. Remember to subscribe and leave a review on your podcast platform of choice. If you enjoyed the podcast, why don't you share it with a friend? Hopefully they enjoy it as much as I intend to enjoy myself this weekend in Belgium, which nicely brings us on to a small announcement for next week's episode. So because I'm going to be on holiday for 4 and a bit days. We're going to be recording a little bit late after the Grand Prix at Kota on Sunday. So the next episode will be out on Wednesday next week rather than the usual Tuesday. So you'll have my apologies for that, but I will be pickling myself in Belgian beer and filling myself with waffles.
You better do that well.
Oh, I will. I intend to. Follow us on Twitter at Lights Out Lads, and on Instagram we are at Lights Out Pod. Yes, next week Kota, one we both like very much, so hopefully it's a good one.
And we've made our predictions, so we'll see how we all do. But
we got a fun mix of drivers for our predictions. Do you remember who you had?
No.
Okay, so you had Stroll, Ocon, and Logan Sargent. I've got Albon, Russell, and Norris.
Yeah, I picked yours over mine.
So yeah, you've got two of your three we don't think will even be in sport in 2026.
Exactly. And you've got people that are still going to be at the very pinnacle of the sport.
Yes.
Oh well, on that sad note, we'll leave it there. That's all from us. All the best, and goodbye.
Bye bye.